Welcome back to Gaelic Games Fan TV. I'm joined here by Matthew Hurley from the Gaelic Statsman podcast. We're here to run through the All Ireland football final. Obviously, it's been a couple of days now since the final on Sunday. We're going to be running through the final in greater detail, discussing the game, breaking it down in depth, and we'll also be looking at football team of the year, and we'll be casting our mind back to the ladies football semi-finals. We might even look ahead a little bit to the Camogie final next weekend as well, or this coming weekend between Cork and Waterford, since Matthew is a Cork man, of course. So I suppose, Matthew, how did you enjoy the action? I suppose as a Cork man, you probably took a lot of pride in seeing Kerry getting turned over in Croke Park.
It was brilliant from a personal point of view, and thanks for having me on again, Aaron. But at the same time, a lot of Cork fans actually wanted Kerry to win the game. I'm unsure why, but that's just the way it is. Like, and I actually begged the question: is the Kerry and Cork rivalry dying a small bit? The fact that Cork were shouting for Kerry in the final, but yeah, like that's a discussion for another day. But yeah, Dublin were absolutely deserving winners of the All Ireland. Kerry, like, other than a few players, Paul Gainey, Paulie Clifford, especially the second half, I don't think Kerry turned up in that game, and Dublin just had the will to win it. And that was the difference at the end. Like, Cluxton, absolute leader on the pitch. Fitzsimons, unbelievable performance. And full back, Paul Mannion, as we said off air, outstanding in the forward line. And some of Dublin's players actually didn't step up, but there was more to step up. And I think once Kerry's players didn't step up, more didn't step up because of it. There was only two really in Clifford and Gainey, and that was probably the difference between the two sides. Dublin just had more in the tank than Kerry to win the game, and unfortunately that was the truth of it from a Kerry point of view. But yeah, ultimately Dublin All-Ireland champions, and 31st All-Ireland I think it is now, Aaron. So, like, you're catching up to Kerry.
We are. Yeah, no, we're only 7 behind them, and I think at the before we'd won the All Ireland in 2011, I think we were 14 behind them. So we've cut that in half in a space of a decade or so. But look, I mean, will we be able to catch them? I mean, Kerry certainly aren't going anywhere anytime soon. But I mean, looking at the game as somewhat of a neutral. Obviously, I know you're probably cheering very much for Dublin, but I suppose watching the game, like, how did you find the game in particular? Because the first half was it was kind of poor enough. Like, I've watched the game back before, I've seen the highlights and everything else, and like the first half was very slow. Like, there's no doubt about it. I think either side weren't at their best. Dublin were missing chances, Kerry were missing opportunities. It was very cagey. Like, Kerry had 61% of the possession in the first half, yet only had 5 scores on the board. But then in the second half, look, it opened up, and I think the goal before half time from Paul Gainey very much opened it up. I think Dublin had to chase the game at that point at the start of the second half, and the Paddy Small goal very much turns the tide. But what was your thoughts watching on and keeping track of the action and everything else?
Yeah, it was a weird watch, really, the first half. Like, it was very slow, and that was down to probably nerves inside the stadium. Like, nobody wanted to make a mistake, nobody wanted to leave gaps and stuff like that. And another thing, the weather, it was absolutely dreadful from an All-Ireland final point of view. And it actually reminded me of the 2015 final. The 2015 final was just the worst spectacle overall, really. I remember that final, watching that, and that was absolutely awful to watch. But I will say this final, and the Gainey goal, as much as anybody that wasn't supporting Kerry didn't want that to go in, it did open the game up, and it was probably better as a spectacle because of that. And yeah, it was, look, I actually have a few questions in regards to the Gainey goal. Number one, how did David Clifford actually get from the corner to the box? I'm actually not sure how he actually did that. And I think I was speaking to Seamus last night. It actually reminded me of, remember Pat Ryan's goal against Cork in 2018 for Limerick? He skinned Damien Callahan around the end line and just put it in the back of the net. And it looked like he was going nowhere. That was the same with David Clifford. He looked like the was actually getting him in the corner here. But he somehow wriggled his way out of it. Gainey gathers the ball back in the net. Brilliant finish for Gainey. There was arguments of a double hop, but I will say, like, before anybody mentioned in the group chats, I said it was a clear goal. I couldn't see any problem with it. Being from a neutral point of view, I don't think it was a foul whatsoever. And looking at it back, you'd look like, yeah, but at the same time, when you look at the second hop in particular, he puts it off his foot, and by the letter of the law, that's not a second hop. So Gainey's goal should have stood. But definitely in the second half, it opened up completely because Dublin had to go for it. And as well as that, Kerry, like even after the Paddy Small goal, Kerry had to go for it. And it was probably a better spectacle because of that. And maybe in these finals, it takes one moment, one lapse of concentration, one moment of brilliance to just open up a final in general. And that was the way in this game played out. To be fair, like it happened in 2020. I remember Mayo, well, to be honest, like they got the goal pretty early, Dublin that time. But it did open the game throughout the game. Then it was Cage in 2021. Tyrone got the goal. Mayo had to come out in that final as well. And 2022, I know it was a brilliant occasion for shot take, but in general, that was small. That was a small bit cagey as well. Like Kerry were very cagey in the first half. I remember that. So maybe it does take a goal to open the whole thing up in general for a final, whether it is hurling or football. But yeah, very cagey first half. Wasn't the best weather. And while we're on it, we're in July and the weather's absolutely dreadful. I didn't think we'd say that this time of year, but it is the other final. It is July, and yeah, it was terrible weather. It wasn't a great first half, but once again, he got that goal. It opened the whole thing up. But what I will say, Dublin's shooting wasn't particularly bad the first half. Kerry's probably was, and their accuracy wasn't great, but they got that goal when they needed it against the run of play. And I'm actually surprised about that possession stat, actually, 63%. It looked to me like Kerry didn't dominate whatsoever in that game. In the first half, particularly, I thought Dublin dominated most of the ball. They had most of the chances. Like Cluxton, Fitzsimons looked pretty comfortable in the defence there until they gained a goal, of course. So, yeah, it was probably a shot to the system that Dublin conceded that goal. But I think Desi, lay into them at half time and just said, lads, go out and prove what you got. And another thing back of their minds, maybe Desi would have said this as well. Kerry were going for their 40th All-Ireland in total when you're talking about hurling and football. They would have been the first county to do so. Do you want Kerry to be that county? And Dublin, they didn't want Kerry to be that county, and they absolutely lay into it in the second half. And the second half was absolutely open. And before you change to the goal for Dublin, very fortuitous. I looked at it again and again. If Paul Murphy doesn't get a hand on that, Shane Ryan's saving it. I don't care what anybody says. It was a huge deflection, huge slice of luck. But then again, Dublin made their own luck because they went out with intent in the second half and they went for Kerry full for leather.
Yeah, like I think at the end of the day, you need to make your own luck. And I suppose Con has a chance a couple of moments earlier. He hits the crossbar, like he could have, a bit unlucky then. So sometimes these things, I suppose, have a habit of balancing themselves out in many ways. But yeah, like as you were saying there about Kerry in the first half, like because even watching it in like at the Lower Hogan, like I didn't think the possession stat was that large for Kerry, to be honest with you, but I could sense that they were keeping the ball for large parts without really trying to penetrate Dublin. And I thought Kerry were far too passive in the first half. Look, I think Dublin were very conservative as well, in fairness, and I think we were wasteful at times. Like we missed a lot of early chances. I remember Brian Howard pulled one wide. A few other chances went wide as well. But for Kerry, like, were they just too passive? Like, were they too overly cautious? Were they too worried about what Dublin could have offered on the counter-attack? Because it felt like in many ways Kerry didn't really play their own game. Like you seen in the first couple of minutes, they had that chance for Paul Gainey, which is cleared off the line. I remember seeing that and thinking, oh God, like Kerry have, like the floodgates have opened straight away. Like this could be worrying. But I felt like Kerry never really, like Dublin had some good moments and they won a good couple of turnovers. There was moments Kilkenny was tracking back, moments Costello was tracking back. Fitzsimons, as we know, obviously had a phenomenal game. John Small was very good as well. But generally, I felt like Kerry didn't really go for Dublin's throat enough in the first half. Like they didn't take enough risks. What's your opinion on that?
But then again, and I will defend Kerry on this, maybe it was the weather. Like, in fairness, I know it's a cliche kind of an excuse, but at the same time, if you're punting the ball long and things like that, it could easily skid off the turf and skid. Like, in wet conditions, how fast the ball skids off the turf. And it could easily drop wide. And then that's possession back to Dublin. And when you look at Dublin's kick-out stats, 100% in the entire game, and obviously 100% in the first half. So Cluxton was always going to nail his man, whatever the situation. So the Kerry were just determined not to give the ball away so cheaply. But what I will say for shooting stats, actually, Dublin's was 42% in the first half, Kerry's was 41%. And you mentioned us that there was a bit of tenseness, a bit of a sign that the sides didn't want to give the ball away. They didn't want to make a mistake. That they weren't taking risks. And that epitomised it, to be honest with you. I know Dublin had a load of chance in that game, but even from play, 27% shot conversion rate from play in the final. That was pretty bad in the first half. And Dublin needed to fix that. But even Kerry, before the Gaelic goal, was around 20% as well. It was 33% overall, but that's obviously including the Gaelic goal, which happened right at the end of the first half. But what I will say on turnovers, I know Dublin seemed to have good on turnovers in the first half. Kerry actually won more than 11-9. So that's kind of interesting stat as well. As Jason Foley seems to be doing well enough in the first half. Ty Morley had a brilliant game, I have to say, at centre back, and maybe he could have been in for an all-star for his entire performance. I think he won about last year's final against Galway. Actually, Ty Morley probably won the most turnovers of any player on the pitch. He won about 5 or 6. This year, I think in the first half in particular, he was winning, 2-3, and that's a pretty good rate in the first half, I have to say. So Ty Morley seems to be a big game player for Kerry. And what I will say, their defence seemed to be holding out as well. And I know Dublin were shooting badly, but probably that's two sides of the story as well. Kerry were putting the pressure on Dublin forwards as well, and they were forcing them to make mistakes. So in that sense, I think Kerry defenders actually had a stranglehold of Dublin. But the thing is, I think midfield all day. Like I said to you during the week on my own podcast, probably whoever wins the midfield battle would win the game. Who won the midfield battle in this game? Dublin, clearly. 100% kick-out. Actually, Kerry had 80% in the first half. Overall, 87%. But still, it's decent enough. But it wasn't as perfect as Dublin's. And that was where the game was won and lost. Where Brian Fenton, James McCarthy, and Brian Howard in particular really excelled. A lot of talk actually went to Mick Fitzsimons, and deservedly so. He marked Clifford out of the game, fair play to him. But the guy that was sweeping up ahead of Fitzsimons was Brian Howard. And I think he did get the credit he actually deserved out of this final as well. And he was up there for man of the match as well as that Cluxton, just a brilliant goalkeeper. And I don't know, I might have to apologise to Desi Farrell or Stephen Cluxton in general for saying it was probably the wrong move, because I thought David O'Hanlon definitely earned his place in the league. But Cluxton, in this final in particular, was a leader when he stood up to take those frees in pressure situations in the first half. And as well as that, a small thing in the second half, and Seamus made a very good point in his own podcast. So Cliff, listen to it if you haven't already. He made the point about Fitzsimons and Brian Howard surrounding David Clifford. They were almost going to go into a fist fight. But Cluxton, he rushes over to Brian Howard and says, no, get away. Get away. You're going to do something stupid. Get away from David Clifford right now. And that, like, if he didn't do that, Brian Howard could have been sent off, and that would have derailed Dublin's whole hopes. It's just small things like that drives on a whole team. And I think these three lads in particular, Fitzsimons, McCarthy, and Cluxton, are just a credit to themselves, but not only themselves, but to the whole Dublin team as well. And that's just the team ethic that Dublin have built under Jim Gavin, and this year in particular under Desi Farrell. Even when things got tough, the whole team stuck together, and they were saying, we're going to come out of this by hook or by crook. And they did. In fairness, they produced a very good performance, and that has to be credited to.
Absolutely, absolutely. Hello, my name is James. It's great to see Dublin win. Had a few too many points after on Sunday and had to ring in sick yesterday. Yeah, you and me both, my man. You and me both. No doubt about that. But yeah, you mentioned there about Cluxton. Like he was phenomenal. Like I thought he was Dublin's best player in the first half. Like his kickouts are just spot on, and like when you see it so close up and you see how he just sees things that other people can't see, and it's very hard to explain in many ways. Like he sees movements, he sees off the ball runs, he just sees everything. Like it's almost like he's got laser vision, or he's got 4 or 5 eyes. He can just see everything that's happening all across the pitch. And even those frees he kicked as well. Like I think I've seen something. It was the first free he actually kicked since 2014. I think I heard a statistic during the week. So like the fact he hadn't kicked a free since 2014. To be fair, he did kick one against Kildare, but he put it wide. These were the first ones he put it over. So like the fact he's come back in, and like the thing is, like obviously on the Sunday game and everything else, like people were talking about Fitzsimons, McCarthy, and Cluxton, and talking about them maybe retiring. But like to be fair, Cluxton, maybe he doesn't have the range on his kickouts anymore. But like, he's still more than capable of playing another year, in my opinion. McCarthy the same, and Fitzsimon's the same. Like, why is there such a rush to retire these lads when they've proven they're good enough? And like, who's to say they're not back here again this time next year with 10 All Irelands?
But I will say it might upset a few Dublin fans, including yourself, Aaron. I will say maybe they sensed this year they all got together. McCaffrey as well. I know he's young enough, but McCaffrey coming back into the panel, Dean Rock, they all got the band back together. And Paul Mannion as well, who was young enough, but he came back into the panel as well. They all said, let's go for one. They might have said this. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but they might have said, here we go, one last hurrah. We'll go out and win this All Ireland. And maybe there's a sense that they could retire in the winter. That's just my viewpoint anyway. I don't know what you think about that yourself. I actually think McCarthy has another year left in him. Fitzsimon's possibly. Cluxton. Again, like goalkeepers is a weird breed. Like actually, coincidentally enough, I just seen a notification from the soccer world. Gianluigi Buffon actually retired today. And he's what, 45 years of age? So
yeah, Jesus, I didn't even know he was still going.
Yeah, I didn't either at all until I see the notification there on the phone. But that just shows you, like in elite level sports, if you have the temperament, you could keep going for a long time as a goalkeeper. Like he went on, Gianluigi Buffon, probably one of the most legendary goalkeepers in my time watching soccer. 45 years of age. Cluxton's what, 40, 41 now? So
42, I think, yeah.
42.
I think he recently turned 42, yeah.
But by that logic, with Buffon, he could still go another 3 years. And that's, that's the thing with Stephen Cluxton. I will say this game probably epitomised that in general, like 100% kick-out rate. Like, who actually does that on All-Ireland vinyl? It's incredible, really. I'm actually going to look at the long kickouts in general for Dublin. Yeah, he kicked a few even above the 45 things that. They actually weren't all short. I think he kicked about 10 beyond the 45-metre line. And he got every single one nailed. That takes, he's a guy that has led Dublin really. I know he's in goal and he doesn't do it literally, but he's led Dublin from the front. He set the standards. And I think he's probably, that's probably the reason. It's not just a coincidence that Dublin lost the All Ireland in 21 and 22, that he wasn't there. It's because he sets the standards around the dressing room, around the pitch. Case in point with the Brian Howard, he does more than being a goalkeeper, being shot stopping, distribution, kickouts, all that. He's more than that. He's a leader on the pitch, and he tells the players, "Look, don't do that. You'll get yourself sent off," and things like just small little things like that, and just driving on his team. Nothing like shouting wise or things like that. Like, for example, Davy Fitz, for a player back in the day in the 90s and whatever, he was a shouty type of goalkeeper. And the thing is, Cluxton isn't a shouty type of goalkeeper. He isn't the guy that wants to take the limelight at all. Like, it epitomised that in 2011 when Dublin won their first All Ireland in, I think it was 16 years. Cluxton actually, after getting that 45, he wasn't celebrating like a madman. He walked down the tunnel. He got his All Ireland medal. I'm walking down the tunnel. I'm not going to celebrate like an absolute lunatic or whatever. And I think that probably separates Cluxton in this day and age of goalkeepers to the other goalkeepers across the landscape of the GA. He's just an incredible athlete. He's an incredible motivator. He's an incredible goalkeeper, incredible at kickouts. He's just an absolutely incredible player overall. And even the frees, to take those frees, like they obviously first points of the season. I didn't expect Cluxton to go up now yesterday or on Sunday, should I say?
Me neither. I was saying to you off air, like I thought Costello would have been on them, but not entirely sure what the thinking was there. But look, in the end, Cluxton put both of them over. So I think the most important thing is putting them over the bar, and he did, and he's done it in the big moments. He's Cluxton is the man to have done it in 2011 and everything else. But I agree with you. Yeah, like I didn't probably see that coming either, to be honest.
Didn't at all, no. Even when he took the first 45 or free, whatever it was, I actually thought he put it wide before he stepped up. And that thing with Cluxton, he probably does some things that are just unexpected from a goalkeeper in general. He's probably set standards for goalkeeper. I know you talk about Orledge, Ethan Rafferty, Shane Ryan. and all them. But over the years, I think Stephen Cluxton's probably set the standards for those goalkeepers to go on and improving their distribution and improving their leadership more than anything else as well. He's just a standard bearer throughout the country. He's just an incredible goalkeeper. He's just probably a likeable character as well. He doesn't get in your face or anything like that after an All-Ireland win. He's just a model pro. That's all I could say about Cluxton. He's just an absolutely brilliant individual player. And he only conceded one goal in the championship this season through Paul Ganey. It's an incredible record for a 42-year-old goalkeeper. Incredible, really, from Cluxton's point of view. And the thing is, actually, in my All-Star, we'll get on to All-Star team in a minute. I actually picked Shane Ryan in goal instead of Cluxton. I don't know. It could go either way. I think Ryan had a very good year as well, and we were talking about that in the podcast during the week. But Cluxton has been equally as brilliant this season, and should be applauded for not just this year in general, but his whole career as a Dublin goalkeeper has been absolutely exceptional.
Yeah, I suppose it's one of them with a goalkeeper. You can only pick one of them, so it's such a tough one. And both of them had very, very, very good seasons. In fairness, do you think it was then the older guard, your McCarthy, your Fitzsimons, your Cluxtons, that ultimately dragged Dublin over the line going down the home stretch? I mean, we were chatting off air there about the fact that one common theme about Dublin all year, regardless of how they've looked, and there's been plenty of times this year where Dublin have looked very average, but even in a lot of those average games, they've found a way to get themselves over the line. In the league against Clare, we were 5-6 points down going into the final 10-15 minutes. We pulled it back off the win against Cork. We were far from brilliant, and we turned it around, won that game. Other than losing to Derry in Celtic Park, I think it was, that's the only game we lost all year. And we obviously drew at Roscommon in the championship. And you think back to the game against Kildare and Croke Park where we were all going mad. Dublin still found a way to drag themselves over the line. And in the end, that's how they've done it. They dragged themselves over the line against Monaghan when the going got tough. And against Kerry, there was two separate occasions in the second half where Kerry were 3 points in front. I mean, a lot of people obviously looked, the goal for Dublin was huge from Paddy Small. In some ways it did swing the momentum, but in many ways, in my opinion, it just kept Dublin alive because Kerry actually kicked the next 3 points after that. And it was actually in the final 10 minutes where Dublin outscored Kerry 7 points to 2. So do you think it was then the older guard that ultimately dragged Dublin over the line, that experience of having been there and done it in the big moments? Or do you think maybe the younger players should take some credit as well?
The thing is, actually, and you talk about strength and conditioning coaches and things like that, and that's okay with the likes of Kerry, with the likes of Galway, Mayo, Cork, Armagh, all them counties that have made strides in their own right this season because of keeping with certain teams up until 70 minutes and things like that. But what you can't buy is experience. Dublin have that in spades. They have it, and they won't deny that. Fitzsimons in the last few minutes knew what to do, knew how to shackle Clifford in the last few minutes when it was getting, time for action. James McCarthy didn't have his best game, but he absolutely put his body on the line. Brian Fenton, more than anything, actually, Brian Fenton, I thought really impressed me in the second half. He was a guy who stood up when it was counted, and did that against Monaghan, and he did that against Mayo as well. He was kind of a second half player. When Dublin needed to get somebody to rise them up to the level in crunch time, Brian Fenton was there. And that's why he deserves probably an All-Ireland or an All-Star this season alongside Brendan Rodgers in midfield. He's been superb. And as well as that, I'll go back to this, probably the most underrated performance as well. And he's probably one of the most least experienced players in regards to Cluxton, Fitzsimons, all them. Brian Howard, outstanding. Sweeping in front of Fitzsimons, he had to do that job as well. Every Dublin player had a job, and they got it down to a T. Cormac Costello, I said to you off air, I know you might say there was niggle and stuff like that, but he had 100% shot accuracy in the semi-final and the final or the quarter-final combined against Monaghan and Mayo. He could have easily taken the spotlight out of everybody else in that Dublin team, but he sacrificed that. He took one for the team. He said to them, I'm going on Tom O'Sullivan, or he got a job to go on Tom O'Sullivan. He stuck to it throughout the whole game. Tom O'Sullivan wasn't the threat that he usually is for Kerry in years gone by. And that was down to Cormac Costello. He might not have been fully fit, but boy, he was well able to stick with him. And I don't think any other forward has done that with Thomas Sullivan this year, the way Cormac Costello did. And fair play to him for that. And actually, I mentioned the off air as well. Morris Brosnan, very good journalist from the Irish Examiner, following me if you haven't already, made a very good point as well. Colin Basquet, top scorer for play all year with 5 goals and 17 points. Fair play to him. But the most important score he contributed to wasn't any of those scores. It was the Paddy Small goal. Because them small details, he was the guy to put in the tackle on Gavin White. He was the guy to put the pressure on him. He was the guy that forced the turnover. Dublin get the turnover, back of the net, Dublin back of the game. It's just selfless acts like that make Dublin the team they are. And that you have to applaud that. Same as Limerick, same as Dublin over the last few years, same as the Kerry team in the closes, Tyrone to an extent as well. You have to credit these teams when they get over the line once it comes to crunch time. And Dublin have definitely gone over the line when it comes to crunch time over the last 2 seasons. And that's the reason why even the most inexperienced players in them situations, the likes of Costello, the likes of Basquet, the likes of Brian Howard, still stepped up when their county needs them. And that was with the difference between Dublin and Kerry as well on Saturday. And the experienced players, of course, of Fitzsimons, Cluxton and McCarthy. They're just evergreen. And they're an absolutely incredible bunch. And Daisy Farrell definitely needed that together, especially for this season, to peak at the right time, at the right stage. And you talked about, Dublin fans ranting and raving about the Lee performance. But what I will say, there's so many examples of teams throughout the landscape that they actually peak at the right time. You look at Limerick hurlers, didn't do well in the Munster Championship at all. They still went out and won it. They won the Munster Championship and won the All-Ireland. Dublin the same, obviously. Cork Camogie, who we might talk about a bit later, didn't do well at the start of the season, 4 losses in a row. Matthew Toomey's team are peaking at the right time. Every single one of those teams are all-Ireland worthy because they're peaking when they need to peak. And Dublin did that this year, and fair play to them for that. And you just have to applaud them, really, for that. In general, you might have to applaud Kerry as well, because Kerry were a bit of in rag order at the start of the year as well, but they peaked at the right time in the semi-finals and eventually to get to this final too. So you have to put them credit down to that as well. And I just think that probably separates the good teams from the great teams. And Dublin are definitely one of the great teams.
Absolutely, yeah. And I agree with your point as well about Colin Basquet. I thought he was man of the match personally because I thought it was down to him that we won the All-Ireland. I'm going to be honest. He wins the turnover for the goal for Paddy Small. He kicks 2 points. He wins the free late on for Dean Rock. He also sets up Paul Mannion for the point as well to pop it over the bar. He was the difference for me, and I'm amazed as well that he's not really being considered for Footballer of the Year, considering he is the top scorer from play in the championship, and he was unbelievable against Mayo. Fair enough, he was quiet enough against Monaghan, but look, that can happen. Not David Clifford had an off day yesterday. It happens. It happens to all the best players. But we'll certainly get onto that a little bit later. As for, I suppose, some of the chatter about Kerry and in particular David Clifford, yonder says Sean O'Shea, the most overrated player in the country, great free taker, but anonymous in open play. No Clifford equals no party for the kingdom. I definitely wouldn't agree with that now, to be fair. I think Sean O'Shea, I think maybe the standards are so high, or people think, the standards are so high that maybe if the standards aren't there, people automatically assume that he's not a great player. But I don't think Sean O'Shea had his most vintage, most best performance yesterday in the world, but I still think he had a very good season. Yesterday was a tricky game for Sean O'Shea because it was very cagey. He had to wait for his moments. He had to do a lot of defensive work. But in terms of David Clifford, I mean, a rare off day for him on Sunday. What was your take on it?
My take on it, first of all, for the social media outrage and David Clifford from Kerry fans in particular for his performance, disgraceful. I will say this, I'll defend David Clifford to the hill because of this. Who was the reason why did Kerry get to the final? It was because of him and Sean, and that comment as well about Sean O'Shea being overrated. That's another reactionary statement, because Sean O'Shea is a reason as well why Kerry got to the All-Ireland final. And I said this before the quarter final against Tyrone, and I actually stand by this point, and it probably proved a small bit in the final. If David Clifford and Sean O'Shea are not on it for Kerry, who else is there? And I just think without them two, I think and maybe even Paddy Clifford. Without them three in general, I think Kerry are bang average. I just think so in general, and that's not being disrespectful to Kerry and all that. I just think there's not enough players other than them three to step up when needed, when counted. Only one of them three stepped up on Sunday. People can have an off day. Look, Clifford has had David Clifford and Paddy in general have had the toughest year of their lives. Lost their mother in May. To go on and play an All-Ireland final this year, to play in a Munster final, to play some crucial games. Like, it's almost like David Clifford nearly carrying them in every game this year. And what's the thanks he gets? A slagging on social media. And I think that's wrong. I honestly think that is incredibly wrong. And the thing that Paul Flynn said, and you'd agree with this, I know he's a legend for Dublin and stuff like that, and he actually quoted my stats and stuff like that in fairness to him earlier on the season. But what he said today, I don't know, was he on the beer or whatever, but there was no need. The guy, he's already, hurting already. You would see him in the coming home parade last night. The guy's hurting, and for that to come up on social media, I think it's very, very poor. And when you look at the landscape actually of this season for Kerry and the tight games now, I'm not counting Clare, Loud, Tipperary, I'm counting the really tight games. Mayo, the player that stood up was David Clifford. They lost that game, but it could have been more if David Clifford and Shane Ryan weren't on their top form that day. Cork, it was David Clifford that stepped up and Sean O'Shea in the first half. Against Tyrone, it was John O'Shea and Paddy Clifford. In the semi-final, it was all three stepped up, to be fair to them, in stages of the game. Only one of them stepped up at the final, and only one of them stepped up against Mayo. That's my point with Kerry. But at the same time, another point is, Kerry wouldn't have gone near the final without the exceptional performances of David Clifford this year. Some exceptional first half displays by Sean O'Shea, the second half displays against Tyrone and Derry in particular in the quarter and the semi-finals. Kerry fans need to remember that. Why they got to the All-Ireland one in the first place. It was because of them two and Paddy as well. That's the reason, and Shane Ryan saves. Not just the team in general. Like, David Clifford's been exceptional this year. I just think it was wrong. I really think it was wrong the way it was treated. And another narrative which is absolutely stupid around social media. David Clifford isn't a big game player because he hasn't beaten Dublin in the final. Ridiculous. He's going to beat Dublin in the final in the next few years. It's inevitable that it's going to happen, that David Clifford is going to beat Dublin in a final. It's just not this year. It just didn't go his way this year. But calm down a small bit, He's going to do it in the next few years. And we're not forgetting the final against Galway last year, where Galway had Killian McDade, Shane Walsh, all stepping up to the plate. And yet David Clifford pulls it out of the fire and produces a man-of-the-match performance that day. We're not remembering that, are we? It's just the little things that Kerry and the fans across the country that are slagging David Clifford just have to remember a small bit what he's done before the final. And remember, everybody makes mistakes. And what I would say before I cross over to you, Aaron, I seen an article or player rating thing before the All-Ireland final in the newspaper saying nobody is perfect, but David Clifford is nobody. How does that help him?
Yeah.
It's very, very poor journalism. Whoever wrote that, I don't know. Like, it's ridiculous, really, how the media portrays us from that point of view. But that just puts more pressure on the lad, and he doesn't need that. With the year he's had, the amount of times he's dragged Kerry out of a hole, I just think it's needless, to be honest with you. And all those things contribute to maybe he had an off day, and then he gets a bit of an outrage. I think it's really poor, Aaron. And I'm saying this as a Cork fan. I think David Clifford is an exceptional player. And I just think the treatment of him after the game on Sunday was a disgrace on social media. And whoever posted some shameful comments, including Paul Flynn, including that newspaper before the game, should hand their heads in shame.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, like it was definitely a bit far from Paul Flynn. All right, like I definitely think he probably did have, he was after celebrations yesterday. I'm pretty sure I've seen him there. So yeah, he probably had a few beers, and I think he even said himself today, like, no more tweeting at midnight and everything else. Like, it's probably it's probably not the best thing to be doing, especially when you are such a public figure like Paul Flynn, and especially after the day that David Clifford had as well, and everything else. It probably was rubbing salt in the wounds, and in more ways than one. What do you think then? Because Kerry last year seemed to, in my recollection, get a lot more from apart from Clifford and Sean O'Shea. So has the standards just dropped? Has there been too much responsibility been placed on Clifford and O'Shea? Have Clifford and O'Shea just been so good that the other players don't need to perform? Like, what's your take on that? Because last year, I remember, like, fair enough, Killian Spillane, like, has been injured a little bit this year. But remember, he was on it for large parts last season. Paul Gainey, I thought was I know he had a very good final, but I thought overall he had a much better season last year. And they seem to be getting a lot more. Like Gavin White was contributing more, Paul Murphy was contributing more. Like what's your take on Kerry? Like why do you think they have gone from a team that probably were getting like obviously Clifford is Clifford. He was phenomenal last year, phenomenal this year. But why has there been such an over-reliance on him this year?
Maybe the standards of some of them players dropped this season. I'll put it out there in general, and just about the players. I actually think 3 defensive players actually did well enough this season in general. Like Shane Ryan had an exceptional year in goal for Kerry. He saved so many shots from Mayo, particularly down in Killarney. He was in exceptional form that day. Jason Foley, I think, had a decent enough year as well. That performance against Tyrone and the performance against Derry were very, very good. Tyke Morley, brilliant final performance. But I will say the players around him, Thomas Sullivan, Gavin White, Paul Moore, as you said there, they were good enough, but they weren't contributing as much as they have all throughout the whole years. Dermot O'Connor, I know he had that one good game against Tyrone, but the same as well. Maybe the success, and I will say that maybe got to their heads a small bit. That could have been it, possibly. I think personally, Paul Gainey, I just think he's probably a bench player nowadays for Kerry. I think he was an exceptional player back in the day, but it's almost like the argument with Patrick Horgan or Tommy Freeman back in the day with Monaghan or Conor McManus at stages this season. Maybe there's a time to use him as an impact sub. They're at that stage of their career. I think Paul Gainey is at that stage of the career in general. But yeah, I just think maybe the success got to their heads, and maybe there was a thing against Dublin. And there might have been a sight of that from Kerry in the final in general. They were almost like, David, please help us. And David, unfortunately, wasn't on his A game for Kerry, and he just didn't help them. Like Seamus Brady made that point, very good point in general. And Kerry just struggled when David wasn't on form, when Sean O'Shea wasn't on form. They struggled. And it's an unfortunate end of the year for Kerry in general. But I just think, did their performances this year warrant an All-Irelands? I would say, other than David Clifford and Sean O'Shea, no. I would say not. I think the Mayo performance in Killarney was poor. Mayo looked a lot better than them that day. Cork, on another day, Cork could have even beat them. The quarterfinal against Tyrone was probably the only exceptional performance on route to the All-Ireland final. And to be honest, like Tyrone, I thought they were very, very poor that day in the quarterfinal. I stand by that. Derry, I think they did well to grind out the victory, but like they struggled in that game against Derry. Like there was stages of that game where Derry could have easily put Kerry away, and they had to thank Shane Ryan actually from that save from Garba Kindle. So overall, from overall standpoint, would I think Kerry have deserved the All-Ireland if they won on Sunday? Given all their performances throughout the year, I don't think so. I think Dublin probably deserved it more. Given their performances throughout the year, and that's why they probably are All-Ireland champions. They probably perform as a team, whereas Kerry, this year in particular, I think they're looking to Sean O'Shea and David Clifford to produce a bit of magic, maybe a bit too far down the line. I just think in the quarterfinals and the semi-final, they would work, but in the final, you need everybody to step up. And I don't think everybody stepped up for Kerry, not just Clifford and O'Shea. It was nearly the whole team. I think Gainey had a good game, and I think Paulie Clifford had a good game. The rest of them, Tyke Morley as well, the rest of them, I don't think we're at it. And it isn't just David Clifford, it's the whole team as well. And it's a weird one. Graham O'Sullivan's actually another one. He had a very good year last year and didn't seem his normal set this season either. So, yeah, it's a strange one in general. Now, while we'll say Dublin's bench was probably better than Kerry's, Killian Spillane was the only guy to score off the bench for Kerry. And Kerry just don't have enough of quality in their squad as Dublin do. And that's probably the difference. Actually, there's a few Kerry players at the bench that actually had potential over the last few years, but it kind of dried up small. But Mihal Burns, I seen him for Dr. Crokes a few years ago. Very good footballer, technically gifted. But when he comes out the pitch, he doesn't seem to offer that much. I don't know, it's just me, but players like that need to stand up more for Kerry when counted, because David Clifford and Sean O'Shea aren't going to be fit for it an eternity. There's going to be a period where David Clifford gets a hard injury or just an injury to keep him out for 2 or 3 games. And Kerry need more players to step up more than him. So Kerry need to fix that aspect of the game fast if they're going to win more All-Irelands than they'd hope to, or else they might be left broken-hearted again in the next few years.
Absolutely. Yeah, just a comment here from Meadman earlier says, is this the last dance for Dublin unless they win the All-Ireland next year? The average age of the squad is old and there's a lack of underage success. Yeah, it is a fair point. Like, there is obviously a lot of lads who are getting on a bit. We obviously mentioned the 3 lads who won 9 All-Irelands. Dean Rock, rumours about him maybe stepping away potentially. He's obviously won 8 All-Irelands and he's not a regular starter with Dublin anymore. Like, obviously Fenton, Kilkenny, McCaffrey, like they're just coming up to their late 20s, early 30s, so they probably still have a couple of years left in the tank. But like, when you look at it, there isn't a huge amount of underage coming through for Dublin. Like, there's no point denying it. Like, when you look at Kildare, they've definitely had the hoppiness at under 20 level the last couple of seasons. And I do think, to be fair, like, obviously as fans, look, we enjoy the All-Ireland. We won't worry too much about this until next year and like that. But to answer the question, like, there probably is a massive rebuild coming for Dublin in the next couple of years, which is why I think the All-Ireland yesterday was so important, especially for players like Lee Gannon, Lorcan O'Dell, Ross McGarry, Keane Murphy, Darren Newcombe, the young lads who've come into the panel. Like, that will hugely stand to them potentially when it comes to our next final, whether it is next year or the year after.
The thing is, you never know our next few years. I know under 20, granted, it's a very good division for Kildare to win. They've won 2 of the last few under 20 titles. But I'll give you an example, actually. Down have excelled in under 20 over the last few years, and they're not kingpins of Ulster. Cavan did well in winning another 20 title in 2013. I think they won another in that period of time in Ulster, but they've only won 1 Ulster senior in 2020 when it was COVID, and that was a bit of an outlier of a year. So that's the point, really. Like, when you even look down at Munster, Cork have had the hop on Kerry in the last 2 years in under 20, but Kerry still dominated in senior. Look, under 20 is a good grade and all, but maybe it's just the temperament of the big counties that get them over the line in provincial titles. I still think Lee Gannon's a very good player. Darren Newcombe's a very good player. You still have Dave coming up through the ranks. Comfort's still a very good backup to have. Ross McGarry. Actually, Aaron, Kieran Archer, is he anywhere near the panel? Because he was exceptional years ago. Where's
I don't know. Like, if I don't really know, to be honest with you. Like, only like, obviously Desi just probably doesn't really fancy him. To be honest with you, like, I haven't a clue. Like, he was looking excellent at underage level, and whether there's a huge interest there from himself to actually play for Dublin, I'm not entirely sure. But he look. I mean, if he can do the business club level and everything else, and maybe he could put himself back into contention. But yeah, like, there is other, like, Killian O'Gara's looked very good as well, in fairness, in different moments. There is great club players. Like, Conor McHugh was one of Dublin's best players in the club championship last year. You've got lads at, a Kilmacud Crokes. Like, let's not forget, I think we only had one starter from the All-Ireland champions of Kilmacud Crokes, and that was Paul Mannion. Diaz is on the bench, but, like, you've Darren Mullen, you've Dan O'Brien. Like, there's so many players even for Kilmacud who could possibly come into Dublin in the next couple of years. So there certainly isn't a lack of talent available to Dublin, like, if we're being honest, when we look at it that way.
The thing is, well, and another guy that popped into my mind for Kilmacud Crokes, Dan O'Brien's a great shout. He was a guy that I looked at the last few years. 2020 against Mayo, actually, in the league, I thought the 2 standout players that day, from a youth point of view, were Oisin Mullen and Dan O'Brien. Oisin Mullen's obviously gone down to AFL. He's done absolutely brilliantly. But where's Dan O'Brien gone? And I just believe he's done well for Kilmacud over the last few years, but I just think he needs to start for Dublin now. I think he's a very good footballer, very technically gifted. Well, I will say for Kilmacud as well, and it's good you mentioned about that point, Theo Clancy could replace Mick Fitzsimons. Very good fullback. He was in Dublin under 20 team this year, I'm sure, as well. So he's a very good up-and-coming player as well. He played very well for Kilmacud Crokes. And there is some of them young players. The club championship is going to be actually very interesting from a Dublin point of view. And actually, how old is Tom Fox by any chance? Because he did well for Kilmacud at times in the club championship.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I think it might be mid 20s, maybe. I actually have no idea, to be honest with you, though. So if I'm open to correction on that. But yeah, but he could be an option as well. There's a lot of good players like that are kind of making the breakthrough, in club championships and everything else. So and I think the thing is as well, like with the Dublin club championship, it's always an opportunity for players to step up and show what they're worth. Mainly because a lot of the county players probably won't feature in the early stages, and probably won't feature till the knockout stages for whatever clubs are still involved. But look, we'll obviously have to wait and see. No doubt about that. I suppose we'll run into some football team of the year chat then, and I suppose we will have a look at my own team of the year first of all. Whenever it does decide to load. So we do have it here. So as you'll see there, Stephen Cluxton in goal. I've given him an extra S there. We'll fix that. Apologies. We've got Tom O'Sullivan, a cornerback for Kerry. Jason Foley, a fullback for Kerry. Mick Fitzsimons in there for Dublin. The halfback line, James McCarthy, Dublin. Toig Morley, Kerry. Connor McCarthy, Monaghan. Midfield, Brian Fenton, Dublin. Brendan Rogers, Derry. Half forward line, Paul Mannion, Dublin. Sean O'Shea, Kerry. Cormac Costello, Dublin. Full forward line, David Clifford, Kerry. Shane McGuigan, Derry. And Colin Baskell, Dublin. So thoughts on that there. I was having a look at your team. I actually don't think it's entirely. I think there might be one or two changes really, but I think midfield and forwards wise, I think we have the same teams.
Yeah, exactly. So, and yeah, you gave Cluxton an extra S, so Cluxton must be that good. He's almost like two players on the pitch. So, yeah, and Cluxton's an absolutely exceptional player, deserves a goalkeeper. I had Shane Ryan in goal, but I just think both of them, again, like Tyke Morley and Garth McKinnon, so I think that's a toss up, to be honest with you. I counted there's only 3 changes to the team, so they aren't that different. I would be okay with that team, to be honest with you. There was a lot of talk about Paddy Clifford being in, but I think personally, I don't know what you think yourself. It's either Paddy Clifford or Sean O'Shea, because Mannion's been exceptional this year. Costello has been very good, especially in the latter stages of the competition. Baskell, as you said earlier on, might be up for footballer of the year in some people's eyes. McGuigan, top scorer overall. David Clifford, absolutely majestic. So yeah, I'd be okay with those forwards, despite the fact that Paddy Clifford isn't there. Midfield, I think that's everybody's midfield, to be honest with you. Fenton and Rogers, and deservedly so. The half back line, Conor McCarthy definitely deserves his place in the team. Fitzsimons, Foley, James McCarthy. Yeah, they all deserve their place in the team in their own right. The only question I have for Yarn, because I agree to an extent with Morley and Cluxton. Tom O'Sullivan, explain, because I don't think he had his best year this year on a personal level anyway. But what do you think?
Yeah, I still think he had a very good season from a Kerry perspective. I think in the final, obviously, as you said, Costello done a fairly decent job on him, but I still think he offered a lot going forward. Defensively, obviously, Kerry were pulled apart in different moments, but I still think he stood up in big moments, and I still think he delivered in big moments from a Kerry perspective. Against Derry, I thought he was fairly impressive as well. So yeah, like I think it was one of them. It was probably like I was kind of looking at it from a cornerback position and thinking there wasn't really too many others who hugely stood out as well. Ryan Wiley maybe from Monaghan, Owen Merchant maybe for Dublin, but he didn't always start. Davy Byrne, I wasn't entirely sure. Like he could have maybe put him in. He did have a fairly good game yesterday, I felt as well. Maybe looking at like from a Derry perspective, someone like McCaig or McAvoy, but I suppose we'll have a look at your side then. I think you had Ryan Wiley in there, just looking at it in a cornerback, and you had Garrett McKinless in at centre back, as opposed to myself having Toig Morley in there, and I think that's it then. I think
Shane Ryan in goal instead of Cluxton.
Ryan, yeah.
So yeah. Yeah, it was an interesting one actually. I waited, unlike the hurling one last week where I made a load of errors. This week I waited and decided on the team. I think I came up with the right team personally. Like the two changes that are different to yourself, Shane Ryan, Cluxton and Ryan, it's a toss-up. Both of them have been absolutely very, very good this year. I just think Ryan, in the crucial moments for Kerry, he delivered. I just think more than Cluxton did for Dublin this season. That's just my honest opinion. Against Mayo, Ryan was Kerry's saviour. Against Derry, he didn't make that save for Garth McKinless. Kerry wouldn't have been in the All-Ireland final. So from my point, I think Shane Ryan deserved his place in the team. From my point of view, anyway, McKinless and Morley is an absolute toss-up. Before the All-Ireland final, I would say yourself or anybody else would have gotten McKinless instead of Morley. But because Morley had a very good All-Ireland final, like it's very hard to leave him out then. The last one, actually, that probably caused a bit of a consternation, to be honest with you, with Ryan White. Actually, a Monaghan fan got on to me and said, Ryan Whiteley's been terrible this year, which I think is really, really harsh. I think he's been very, very good for Monaghan. His turnover has been, even in the quarterfinal against Armagh, his argument was to have Carl O'Connell a cornerback. I don't know what you think about that yourself. Like, it's an interesting viewpoint there, but what do you think of those changes yourself? Would you be okay with those changes or not?
Yeah, but Carl O'Connell plays wing back though, doesn't he?
That's the thing, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like, I mean, it's one of them. And then who do you take out of the halfback line? Like, do you take you can't take McCarthy out, in my opinion. Like, he's an absolute shoe in. Do you take Toig Morley or McKinless out? Like, I don't think you do either. So, Conor McCarthy, I think, phenomenal for Monaghan. So, yeah, I don't know. It's one of them. Like, and I suppose it's the midfield question as well. Like, so many great midfielders this year, and in more ways than one. I think Brian Howard's very unlucky as well. I think he had a very good year for Dublin, and there was a part of me that was nearly thinking of putting Brian Howard in at centre back actually ahead of Toig Morley, but at the same time, and to be fair, he has often kind of played in and around that area, sometimes as a sweeper for Dublin this year, so it wouldn't have been too out of place. But at the same time, I think Morley probably ever so slightly shaded it.
Question for you, Aaron. What about what do you think of McKinless at centre back?
Yeah. No. Again, it's a tough one. Like, I mean, he was phenomenal against Kerry. He did a very, very good game, but I just think Toig Morley probably just had a very, very good final. Done a very, very good job in there at centre back. Thought he did a phenomenal game, and I think he just probably ever so slightly edged it. I think McKinless obviously gets that goal against Kerry, and that's probably maybe what ever so slightly maybe you would think would slightly swing it. But at the same time, I think Derry were cut open at times in the semi-final. And look, it's one of them. It's it's chalk and cheese with these teams. Like, you're not putting one player in ahead of another player because one player isn't good enough. It's just opinion, isn't it? Between Morley and McKinless, I could have put any of them in there. I think both have had equally brilliant seasons, but I think the justification is you can't have both of them in there, I don't think. Because if you have both of them, it means you have to take out both McCarthy's. And I think both McCarthy's have more than, they're nailed on the team, basically.
Exactly, the McCarthy name. It's running deep and long in Irish tradition and fair play to McCarthy here. But yeah, it was a difficult one between Morley and McKinless. Even Ryan Whiteley, a cornerback. I was thinking for the viewpoint, Monaghan had such a good year that I just think they didn't deserve just one. And I was just thinking they deserve two. And I just thought Ryan Whiteley was exceptional. Actually, another person that popped into my Instagram comments, other than Paddy Clifford at the forward line, they were saying Conor McManus plays golf, which was a weird comment, to be honest with. But what I will say, McManus, it was exceptional what he did against Dublin, his shooting and all that. But if you're talking about the whole year, did McManus deserve it? In my opinion, no. And I'm sure
like, he wasn't starting. He wasn't starting every game, though. Do you know that way? Like, he didn't start against Armagh. He didn't. I know he came off the bench, and look, he had a phenomenal game. And look, he's a contender, and he definitely deserves to be in the conversation. But I don't think he should have. I don't think so. Like, Enda Smith is probably another one maybe that deserved a good mention. I think he might have got on the Sunday Sport Team of the Year, something like that. I've seen him maybe on a few ones. He did have a very good season for Roscommon, but at the same time, they were knocked out in the preliminary qualifier. So I think it's one of them where it's a bit like Samuel Roy, who was outstanding for Louth, but it's one of them when teams are knocked out early, like, you just can't prioritize those players over like the other players we've mentioned who've done it in semi-finals, quarterfinals, All-Ireland finals.
That's the thing as well. And I will say, from a quarterfinalist point of view, from each of the counties, I think from a Tyrone point of view, Dark Hanavan is probably the only one that you could maybe consider. I think he had a very good year in general. From a Cork point of view, actually, I don't know what you think yourself. Rory Maguire and Ian Maguire, I think, could be up there for nomination, possibly. Armagh, Aidan Farker probably has to be up there as well. And then Mayo. Like, if you're including the league, Aidan O'Shea, but I'm not sure if you include the league. That's the thing. That's a different.
I still think he deserves. I still think he deserves a nomination, but again, I don't think you'd put him in the team.
No, not at all. Jesus, no. And Dermot O'Connor probably deserves another nomination. So, look, probably they deserve a nomination. I don't know what you think about yourself for them nominations. Inda Smith definitely deserves as well. I think maybe a Kildare player might deserve a nomination. I'm trying to think. Oh, Gallen actually for Donegal deserves a nomination. Deserves to be. I think he had a very good year for Donegal, especially the All Ireland series in general. So there's a load of them, but obviously, if you're out of the preliminary quarterfinals and the quarterfinals, you're not going to be prioritised unless you do something absolutely miraculous, like the hurling when Tony Kelly did something miraculous for Clare in 2021, or Patrick Harvin did for Cork in 2019. You're just not going to get noticed unless you do something absolutely extraordinary out of the blue. So that's just the nature of the All-Stars. I know it seems wrong just to ignore those players, because a load of them, Cork, Tyrone, Armagh players, deserve it in their own right. But look, they were out of the championship too early. And maybe the mind of them good performances, maybe the memories of that could have just gone with the semi-finals. And that has to come into fruition too. But it's probably important just to mention those players that had very good seasons, even for the counties that didn't get as far as they hoped.
Yeah, absolutely. And footballer of the year then, like in terms of three, if you had to make three nominations and pick one, what would you be thinking?
Put up a post on this earlier, and I'm going to go James McCarthy, David Clifford, and Brian Fenton. I think them three probably deserves the nominations this year. I think on the podcast during the week, we both said it'll be between James McCarthy and David Clifford for the Player of the Year award. Whoever wins, and I'd stick by that. I'm going to go James McCarthy. I think didn't probably have his best final, but overall, from a stand viewpoint, I think he was exceptional driving the Dublin team on. And I'll make this point as well to a load of people today in my comments saying that James McCarthy didn't perform well in the final. James O'Donoghue didn't perform well in the final in 2014.
Yeah.
And he got Player of the Year. He didn't particularly perform well in periods of the semi-final against Mayo. Still got in Player of the Year. There's a load of examples of players that didn't perform well, specifically in the final, but still got the Player of the Year award. So that's just rubbish, to be honest with you. James McCarthy, throughout the whole season, James McCarthy deserved it, and he is my Player of the Year this season. Colin Baskell, another honourable mention for that. Possibly Cluxton, if you had him in the team. Shane Ryan definitely deserves nominations as well. But I just think the them three that I mentioned there, James McCarthy, is my winner.
Yeah, if I had to pick three, I'd go McCarthy, Clifford, and Colin Baskell. And to be honest with you, I would actually go with Colin Baskell as my footballer of the year, which might be maybe a little bit left field, but I just think he scored the most from play. I think he made the biggest impact in games for ultimately the team that won the All Ireland. Like he was outstanding in the game versus Mayo. He gets 2 goals that day. And obviously in the final as well, like we already mentioned it, like he kicked 2 brilliant points in the second half. He sets up the goal for Paddy Small. He wins the turnover. He wins the free for Dean Rock to kick it towards the end, and he sets up the point as well for Paul Mannion. So I thought Colin Baskell was phenomenal. He was brilliant against Kildare earlier in the year. He scored the most from play, like you said before. And I think he was Dublin's best forward. Like he was absolutely outstanding. Like fair enough, in the semi-final he was a little bit quiet, but look, I think as you said, McCarthy probably had an off day in the final. Clifford probably had an off day in the final as well. But I thought Colin Baskell was outstanding. I really do. And look, he probably won't. They probably will go, I would say, with McCarthy. McCarthy and Clifford will definitely be in there. Who else? I'm not too sure. Maybe Fitzsimons definitely deserves a shout as well, to be fair.
Yeah, Fenton, what do you think?
Yeah, no, he does. Yeah, I think Fenton definitely deserves to be in the conversation as well. Like it's such a tough one. Like there's been so many brilliant footballers. Like, you know, like, and if you were to make an argument for Fenton, it'd be very hard to disagree with it at the same time. I just think at the same time, with Fenton, I just think McCarthy as a more of an influence for Dublin, and obviously Pascal the same as well. But at the same time, Fenton, I think maybe because Fenton's been doing it so consistently at that standard for so long, it gets taken for granted a little bit. Whereas maybe Pascal has burst onto the scene, and it's you see it, you've seen it like sort of happen right in front of you. But yeah, no, it's a great point about Fenton as well, to be fair.
Yeah, and another one actually that popped into my mind for his performance, specifically in the final as well, Paul Mannion. I think at the latter stages, he definitely put his hand up. Costello, when he took good semis at the quarterfinals, clutch moments, I think he proved it as well. Maybe if Costello didn't do the selfless act and go on Thomas Sullivan, maybe he could have been in the conversation. He didn't do it, but that's for another day's discussion. But there is a load of Player of the Year nominees, actually. You look at Shane Ryan for Kerry, definitely. McGuigan possibly for Derry, top score overall. I think that's a brilliant achievement, to be fair, to pick David Clifford by points. So he deserves to be a nominee as well. There's a lot of nominees, to be fair, for Player of the Year, even other than the finalists. So, yeah, overall, there's been a very good player of footballers this season.
Yeah, and even David Clifford, look, even despite it all yesterday, like he still, as someone said earlier, like he still set up the goal for Paul Gainey. He still kicked 3 points. Like he still had an outstanding season, I thought, for Kerry. Absolutely no question about it, and definitely deserves to be in the conversation. I suppose we'll just run through both of the All Ireland ladies football semi-finals. So it was Kerry 116, Mayo 111. So big result there for Kerry. And it was Cork 13 points, Dublin 2-19. Despite the controversial first half goal from a Dublin perspective, it was fairly comfortable in the end for Dublin. And sorry to rub it in, but yeah, Dublin in the final. Here we go. Once again, Dublin Kerry again.
Yeah, exactly. No, I was at these ladies football semi-finals, so good quality in fairness, but yeah, disappointing in the last game. Really, really disappointing. Just the way the Cork performed, really. They fell flat really in this game. It was very, very poor. And the telling stat of this, actually, Cork scored 5 points for play, Dublin scored 218. That's the difference between the two sides. And I will say this, Dublin looked really drilled in this game. Like Jennifer Dunn in midfield was outstanding. Lauren McGee, who eventually got the player of the match, Ward was very good. Ellen Gribben coming off the bench was very impressive. Hannah Tyrrell and Cara Rolla. There was a stage in the game, actually. Laura O'Malley, a Cork sub, actually had the ball in her hands. I think this was the 50th minute of the game. And Cara Rolla was playing for the full game. She literally outrun Laura O'Malley. And you're like, this girl is absolutely incredible. The pace she has on her, even after playing 50 minutes of football, it was incredible to see from Dublin. And you look at Abby Shields in goal, who's really slotted in very nicely. Like Ciara Tran's been a legend for Dublin over the last few years, but Abby Shields has done absolutely brilliant in goal this season. And I have to say, Ailish O'Dowd has been very good for Dublin, alongside Jennifer Dunn in midfield as well. And Big Bowen deserves a lot of credit for grinding these players together. Let's not forget last season, they lost to Donegal in the quarterfinals. And a lot of people thought Dublin were gone, simply gone. And then they lose to Kerry in the All-Ireland Championship this season, which should be an interesting viewpoint. They lost at Parnell Park this season. Should be interesting going to the final knowing that. But to turn it around like that for Big Bowen, it's incredible, really. And what I will say from a Cork point of view, it was very, very poor. I just think some of the players just gave up, and it was very, very poor to see in general. And yeah, the goal, what I will say, it was controversial at the time, but Jennifer Dunn had a goal wrongfully disallowed the second half. So look, it was overruled in a way. So look, Dublin absolutely deserving winners. They go into the All-Ireland final now, but Cork, poor year, really poor year. And after beating Kerry in the Munster Championship, there's a lot of promise after that, but it's just the fact Cork aren't their usual selves for the last few years. Like there was a time when they won 6 All-Irelands in a row. They were absolutely incredible, top of the world with the likes of Breach Corkery, Breach Stack, Orla Finn, Orla Farmer, brilliant players over the last few seasons. But now this current team, I don't think are good enough to win an All-Ireland. And it's just the unfortunate facts that Cork need to step it up in the next few years to catch up with Dublin and Kerry. And as for the Kerry and Mayo game, Mayo put up a good fight. I will say in the second half, they were very, very good. Unlucky not to get the result in the end. Deirdre Doherty with an absolutely outstanding goal in the second half to bring Mayo back into it. But this game was all about one player, Louise Ní Bhur-Hurtig. What a performance. 110 11 shots taken out of 12, 92% shot accuracy. She's a top scorer across the board for play overall. If you're counting All Irelands, if you're counting All Irelands for play, she's top of all the lists. And she's been absolutely incredible for Kerry this season. And, you know, it's British. I hear she's a brilliant coach as well for Mercy Mountauk. They beat Clonakilty Sacred Heart Community School in the past year or so, and she was a coach of that team. So not only is she a brilliant player, but she knows, how to coach teams as well. And she's just a brilliant advocate for ladies football and a brilliant footballer in general. So yeah, brilliant performance for Louise Verhurtig, probably player of the year already this season. Worth noting as well, Cheerful Shea out for the ACL with an ACL injury for Kerry, and for Kerry to bounce back from that setback to get into an All-Ireland final, it's incredible. And how Dublin stop Louise Verhurtig is going to be the big question in the final, because she's an absolutely exceptional player. And to be honest with you, I actually don't mind who wins the final. Like, I know, like, the Kerry ladies haven't won the All-Ireland since the 90s or something like that, so it's a long time going for them. For Dublin, 2020, it's a big one for Mick Bowen and his team to get over the line. And I will say Kerry actually have the upper hand on Dublin over the last few years. They beat them in the league this season. They beat them in the All-Ireland in Parnell Park, no less. So Kerry have the upper hand going into this final. But Dublin's fitness is absolutely incredible. And it will be interesting to see how Kerry combat that in the final. It should be a very interesting final, I will say that. And looking forward to seeing probably the best two teams in ladies football this season.
Yeah, are we seeing something similar though with the Dublin ladies to the Dublin men's, where the Dublin ladies are kicking right into gear at the exact right time in the quarterfinals and semi-finals? Because there has been a lot of inconsistency with Dublin at times this year, the ladies footballers, in a similar fashion almost to the men's. But when it's got to the knockout stages, like, we absolutely steamrolled Donegal, like, just completely wiped the floor with them. And, like, to be fair, Cork, like, they beat Kerry earlier in the year. They are a very good side. It was very comfortable. It was very, very comfortable. So, like, are Dublin coming in to the right patch of form at the right time?
I think they are, because just the acceleration from the Dublin players in general was absolutely incredible. And when you look at Sinead Ahern actually came onto the pitch, I'm actually not sure what age she is. I would imagine mid-30s. What a performance again. And it's almost like Stephen Cluxton, Mick Fitzsimons and James McCarthy almost with the ladies team. Sinead Ahern's come back into the team, and she's come back to win an All-Irelands. So there's going to be that at the back of their minds as well. I think there's young, exuberant players in the Dublin team as well. Like Eilish O'Dowd wouldn't have been part of the Dublin teams over the last few years. Ellen Gribben the same. Eva Kane might have been over the last few years. Like Martha Burrs now, a colossal figure in the Dublin team, and they wouldn't have been over the last few years. And I think Mick Bowen actually deserves a lot of credit, because when you look at the Dublin players that left over the last few years, Noel Healy, Niamh McAvoy, Sinead Goldrick, those are massive players for Dublin. And for them to lead the panel and them to still excel, I think it's Lindsay Davies, another one actually that I forgot about. There are 4 massive players for Dublin. Lindsay Peat, another one. It's 5. And for Mick Bowen to even to gel those players together at the right stage of the year, and even for them to have the same hunger, it's incredible in general. And brilliant win for Dublin. And I think they'll be relishing the fact of playing Kerry in the All-Ireland final. And they have 2 diamonds up front in Hannah Terrell and Carla Rowe. How Kerry will stop them, I'm not sure. But Kerry, they have very good defenders of their own in Cát Lynch and Kaylee Cronin. I'm sure they'll be well able to set up with them. Emma Costello is another good centre-back. The midfield battle is going to be very interesting actually in the final, because you look at Jennifer Dunn, Eilish O'Dowd for Dublin, and Lorraine Scanlon and Louise Galvin for Kerry. They're both Eilish O'Dowd is probably the most inexperienced out of them 4. So it'll be interesting to see how she deals with the Kerry midfield in general. Like Louise Galvin, again, outstanding performance for Kerry at the weekend. To put it into context, she had a child last year, and she's 35 years of age. And she's still strutting her stuff in midfield for Kerry. It's a really, really good performance by her. Lorraine Scanlon, the same, Cát Lynch. Like, them players around the middle for Kerry, Levy Crowhorn centre forward as well. Like, they'll be tough to stop for Dublin in general. So it seems to be a very, very good final. Definitely looking forward to it. But I think Dublin, you make a very good point. They are peaking at the right time. And it's a credit to Bowen that he's doing it without those colossal players that I mentioned earlier.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, look, hugely excited for it. Like, I'll probably go to anyway in 2 weeks' time. Like, and obviously Dublin and Kerry, no matter what the code is, it's always a spectacle. It's always entertaining, and I think there's a lot of very good storylines going into the final, especially with the fact that Kerry haven't won it in so long. beat us earlier in the year. But Dublin are coming in great form, having won the last 2 games. So it's going to be very, very interesting. Just a word maybe on the Camogie final happening this weekend. Obviously, you're a Cork man, and Cork are obviously in action against Waterford. Waterford bidding to win their first All-Ireland Camogie title in 78 years. So, I mean, look, there's a lot on the line from a Waterford perspective, but I was looking at it there, like Cork are slight favourites going into this one, as you'd expect, obviously, with the fact that Waterford haven't won it in such a long time. But what would be your thinking going into the final?
They haven't just won it in such a long time, Aaron. They've never won it. So,
all right, yeah,
you know,
maybe it was the last final in 78 years. I think it was then.
Yeah, it's the last final in 78
Last
years,
final
but
in 78 years, yeah.
it was the only final they've ever won. So,
Wow, yeah.
I'm getting confused now, Aaron, because it's a long night. But yeah, it's the second final that Waterford have ever been in. An incredible achievement for them. And maybe there's some aura of this team to beat in ladies football. They go into a novel final and they might sense an opportunity to create history. And maybe there's at the back of their minds as well, from a Waterford point of view. Best of luck to them. I wouldn't mind if, I know I'm a Cork fan and stuff like that, but I wouldn't be totally, like, I actually have relatives from Waterford from a past relations. So I'll actually be, happy enough for them if they win the All Ireland. They actually deserve it for the effort they put in here. Brianna Regan and goal, Lorraine Bray, Leisha Forrest, Iona Heffernan, Beck Harton, Niamh Rocket. They're exceptional players all over the pitch for Waterford. I definitely wish them best of luck. In regards to a Cork point of view, actually, I was speaking at the sort of start of Matthew Toomey on the podcast. Check that out if you haven't already. That interviewed. He's quietly confident going into the final. The Amy O'Connor was interviewed by Ciara McCarthy as well worth a listen as well. And she's bubbly. She's excited for the final as well, and so the whole Cork team in general. But I spoke to Matthew Toomey actually. I asked him how does he deal with the favourites tag, and he said that's just a media thing. We're just going to get on with the job. We're concentrated on getting an All Ireland here for Cork Camogie. I just think they're going to get on with their jobs in general. Like, from a Cork point of view, I know Waterford have been it's been an exceptional story this year, and probably one of the stories of the season across all 4 senior codes. But Cork have lost the last 2 finals to Galway and Kilkenny. And if Cork were to lose the final after beating Galway and Kilkenny, it'd be kind of a kick at the teeth, to be honest with you. No disrespect now to Waterford, but the Cork really kind of have to win this final to get an All-Ireland Camogie title. The board, they haven't won one in 5 years. In 2018 was the last title they won. But they have some very good players all over the field. And as well, like Limerick, like Dublin, like the Dublin ladies, men's, all them in general, Cork are peaking at the right time. They lost 4 games in a row at the start of the season, including the Galway 3 times, and Waterford in the Munster Championship. Let's not forget, they lost at Barky Keefe 118 to 115, so that was a tough defeat to take. But since then, they've beaten down Clare, Kilkenny, and Galway. They've won 4 games in a row. So they're on a good run of results at the moment. They have good defensive structure, good attacking structure, and a good bench as well to come onto the pitch. When you look at the 5 subs that came on against Galway, you had Aisling Thompson, Orla Cronin, Orla Callan, Cleona Healy, and Laura Hayes. All the mixed experience, goal getters, you name it. Like, Cork had very good types of players coming off the bench that day against Galway. And I think that'll stand to them come Sunday afternoon. Will it be enough to get them off the line? As a Cork fan, you'd hope so. You'd hope that get over the line. They have some very good players already on the pitch. Saoirse McCarthy's been in exceptional form this season from a Cork point of view. Matthew Toomey obviously praised her on the podcast during the week. Katrina Mackey's been brilliant from play. Amy O'Connor has scored freely as well. Laura Tracy's been very good in the back line. Maeve Callan, very good. Libby Coppinger. So Cork have really performed this season, but can they do it when the day matters most? They haven't done so in the last 2 years. This is the opportunity to do so on Sunday. So you'd be hopeful from a Cork point of view that they do it. But Waterford, there might be a story on the horizon. There might be history in the making come Sunday. And I think every neutral will be up for Waterford, and rightly so. They are going for their first ever All-Ireland title. But Cork will be focused on the job. I think Cork should win it, Aaron, but then again, I wouldn't be surprised if Waterford pull off a shock.
Yeah, because how many times have we seen this across all codes, really, where one team knocks out 2 favourites, obviously in Galway, Kilkenny, and then they're coming in as huge favourites, obviously haven't done so. You've got Waterford there, who are seen or perceived as a massive underdog, and how many times down the years have we seen the big team slip up in those moments? So, like, there's there is a bit of pressure on Cork to deliver, considering what they obviously done beating Galway and Kilkenny, and that could possibly play into Waterford's hands.
Possibly so, and maybe thinking about the last two finals, the way they lost them, and the way they lost the Kilkenny final last year, but they didn't start fast enough. Simple as they needed a Fiona Keating goal to keep them in the game, and they were kind of catching on Kilkenny's coattails for the whole game. Galway, they let a lead slip in the end. Katrina Mackey scored a goal. They were 5 points up at 1 point. You were thinking Cork were going to close this out, but then Galway scored, I think it was 8 or 1-5 on the bounce, and that was the end of that story. So, Cork have to be glued in for the first minute and have to be glued in at the last minute as well. And what I will say about Cork, I think there's been a changed Cork team after the Kilkenny game. We've seen it so many seasons. Cork flattered us even the last few minutes of games, and it happened in the league final against Galway earlier on the year, which was a tough defeat today for the players out of matching as well. But against Kilkenny, when Denise Gall got that late goal, late scores, Cork still found a way to get back into that game. And that's a credit to Cork in general. Maybe that could be an aspect that will get them over the line. But then again, I wouldn't be surprised if Waterford put off a surprise. We've seen it would be the 2021 against Dublin, that amazing victory. Waterford will be thinking that. There's no pressure on Waterford. Everybody thinks they're going to this final to make up the numbers, which they aren't, by the way. I think Beck Carton and Niamh Rock will be thinking about other ideas. Lorraine Bray, the same. They want to win in All-Ireland, make no mistake about it. But Cork, I think, no matter what the opposition, they have to be glued on for the first minute onwards. If they're not, Waterford could catch them on the hop. And that could be the unfortunate reality of the whole situation.
Absolutely. Now, looking, it's going to be a hugely entertaining game. Definitely looking forward to it next Sunday. Make no mistake about that. Before we finish up then, player of the week, moment of the week. I suppose moment of the week has to be Dublin winning the All-Ireland. Player of the week, what are you thinking?
Player of the week, it has to be Stephen Cluxton. I just think absolute brilliant professional as a player. Before we end, actually, player of the week for LGFA, Louise Nevor-Hurtig, unbelievable performance. 110, exceptional top scorer, I think, with 4 goals and 44 points. Incredible from her, and she's definitely going to be a threat against Dublin in the final.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I wouldn't disagree with that. And I think from football point of view, I would go with Colm Basquel personally as my footballer of the week. I thought he was outstanding in the second half, and obviously for me, I think he's been footballer of the year. But we shall see what happens, obviously, when that comes around in a few months' time. So, Matthew, cheers very much for coming on. Make sure to check out the Gaelic Statsman podcast when you get a chance. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And Matthew, thank you very much for coming on. And for anyone who tuned in, we will speak to you all soon.